I want you to try a quick mental exercise with me.
Yeah.
Just close your eyes for a second and picture a war photograph.
Like whatever instantly pops into your head.
Right. Think about what usually comes to mind when you hear that phrase. If you're like most people, you're probably instantly visualizing Robert Kepa's famous blurry photos of the D-Day landings at Normandy.
Oh yeah, the classic action shots.
Exactly. You're picturing this Hollywood-style explosion. Soldiers charging out of a trench or, I don't know, a tattered flag waving through thick smoke, dirt flying everywhere.
A chaotic, adrenaline-fueled hail of bullets.
Yes. The image in your head is loud, it's incredibly dynamic, and it's built entirely on action.
I mean, it makes sense. That's the defining visual language of conflict that history books have, trained us to expect. We're taught to look for the momentum, the bravery, the kinetic energy of the battlefield.
But what if a war photograph contains absolutely none of those things? What if, instead of the deafening roar of artillery and the heroism of a forward charge, there's just this suffocating absolute silence?
Which is a heavy thought.
It is. What if the photo doesn't show you the split second the bomb drops, but forces you to look at the quiet, unbearable reality that settles in long after the dust is cleared?
Well, capturing that requires a completely different kind of visual vocabulary. And that's exactly the space we're stepping into today.
Welcome to The Deep Dive, produced for SanalSurgery.com. Today, we're pulling from this incredible stack of sources, a really rich collection of articles, critical essays, and audio transcripts on visual history.
And they are taking us on a very profound, very heavy journey.
Yeah, they are. But our mission today is not to recount a standard biography. We are exploring a very specific, chilling thesis. And that is, the legendary British photographer Don McCullin does not photograph war. He photographs the collapse of human beings.
Right, and that distinction, it changes everything about how we consume his images.
Yeah.
Because McCullin actively ignores the action.
He does.
He waits for the guns to quiet down, for the immediate adrenaline-pumping danger to pass, and then he turns his lens toward what remains of the human spirit.
He's searching for the precise moment a human being just breaks.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand why this man points his camera exactly where everyone else looks away, we kind of have to look at the environment that forged him.
Yeah, his background is crucial here.
Right. He didn't drop into these international war zones as some privileged danger tourist chasing an adrenaline high. He grew up in post-World War II London.
We're talking about neighborhoods like Finsbury Park in the 1940s and 50s.
A childhood surrounded by literal bomb craters left over from the Blitz, extreme rationing, staggering poverty, and incredibly violent street gangs. He came from the forgotten, really broken margins of society.
And his breakout photograph in 1959 captured exactly that environment. He photographed this notorious London gang called the Governors.
Right, standing inside a ruined, bombed-out building.
Yeah. And that image wasn't published by The Observer because it was beautifully composed. I mean, it was published because it was a raw, unflinching look at survival.
It almost feels like when he eventually travels to major international conflict zones, whether that's Cyprus, Vietnam, Biafra, Lebanon, he isn't stepping into a totally alien world.
Not at all. He's searching for a familiar brokenness.
He's looking for the macro geopolitical version of the micro trauma he witnessed on the streets of London.
He recognizes that shared language of deprivation, like a bullet flying through the air is just physics and ballistics, right?
Right. It's just mechanics.
Exactly. The terrifying story, the one McCullin dedicates his entire life to capturing, is how easily human beings adapt to widespread destruction, and how their inner selves just kind of empty out in response to it.
He recognized very early on that war hollows out the mind long before it destroys the body.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it.
I do want to challenge that approach for a second, though. If you're a photographer standing in the middle of a war zone, and your job is to document the reality of the conflict, isn't turning your back on the action fundamentally altering the story?
How do you mean?
Well, by entirely avoiding the chaotic, bullet-flying moments that define the physical reality of combat, isn't he leaving out a massive part of the truth? I mean, magazine editors practically beg for those front-page action shots.
That's a great point. But what's fascinating here is that pushback gets to the very heart of documentary ethics. McCullin would argue that the physical action of combat actually distracts from the permanent truth of war.
Distracts from it.
Yeah. The flying bullet is temporary. The psychological devastation is permanent. If he gives you an action shot, he gives you an excuse to focus on the military tactics or the weapons or the geopolitical stakes.
Ah, I see.
By stripping all of that away, he forces you to confront the psychological cost.
And to really understand the mechanics of that psychological cost, we have to look at how he captures the mind breaking. The sources detail several core images, starting in the city of Hue, Vietnam in 1968.
Right, during the Tet Offensive.
Yeah. The photo is known as the shell-shocked Marine.
This is, without a doubt, one of the most disturbing psychological portraits of the 20th century.
For those listening, just picture an American Marine sitting down, gripping the barrel of his gun. His face is entirely frozen, caked in this thick, paste-like layer of dirt and sweat.
But it's his eyes that trap you.
Yes, his eyes are wide open, completely unblinking. He's staring straight ahead, but he is registering absolutely nothing in front of him.
The overwhelming sensation of this image is just deep, deep claustrophobia. You're not looking at physical exhaustion. A tired soldier looks very different.
Right, a tired soldier might be slumped over or sleeping.
Exactly. What you're witnessing here is total mental collapse. The mind has completely died to protect itself from the trauma, but the physical body is still reflexively gripping a weapon.
I want to dig into the actual mechanics of how this photo was made, too, because McCullin heavily manipulated the printing process in the darkroom. And honestly, this brings up another massive ethical question.
It really does.
He didn't just print the negative as it was exposed in the camera. He used techniques like dodging and burning, right? Exposing the edges of the photographic paper to the enlarger's light for much longer periods.
Yeah, he actively removed all those soft, forgiving gray tones and turned the background of the war zone almost pitch black.
He essentially erases the physical environment of Vietnam from the photograph.
Which is a bold move.
It is. Which makes me wonder, at what point does capturing the truth cross the line into emotional manipulation? If he is artificially plunging the background into darkness, isn't that a form of propaganda?
Like he's forcing a narrative.
Yeah, like he is dictating exactly how you are allowed to feel.
It is an aggressive, authorial choice, without a doubt. But McCullin isn't altering the content of the soldier's face. He's using the darkroom chemistry to enforce the psychological reality over the physical reality.
Okay, that makes sense.
By burning the edges of the print into total darkness, he removes the sky, the trees, the other soldiers. He leaves you, the viewer, with absolutely nowhere else to rest your eyes.
You cannot look away from the Marine's vacant stare.
Exactly. He forces you into the same psychological void that the Marine is experiencing.
Wow. He's making the visual frame match the mental state. And if Vietnam shows us a human mind shutting down to protect itself, the physical extreme of that collapse is what we see in Biafra in 1968.
Well, this takes us from the mind breaking to the body fading.
And to understand the gravity of Biafra, we really have to understand the geopolitical mechanism at play there. Biafra was a secessionist state in West Africa.
And during the Nigerian Civil War, the Nigerian government imposed a total blockade.
They cut off all food and medical supplies.
Everything. So starvation was actively weaponized. Famine wasn't some abstract weather event or a failed crop. It was a deliberate military tactic.
And McCullin's photograph of an albino boy in Biafra captures the terrifying endgame of that tactic.
That's a brutal image.
The boy is sitting entirely alone. His bones are protruding so sharply through his skin, it honestly defies human anatomy.
It does.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The most disturbing mechanism of this photo is the absolute suffocating silence of it. Normally, conflict photography relies on a dynamic narrative of intervention, right?
Right. You usually see a medic rushing in with a stretcher.
Or a mother desperately holding a child, or hands reaching out toward the camera begging for help. It gives the viewer a sense of hope, a sense that someone is doing something.
But here, there is zero action. There's no rescue narrative. There's only a quiet cellular fading away.
He strips away the drama to show you the slow, mechanical process of dying.
Exactly. When we hear a term like blockade or famine on the evening news, it just remains an abstract statistic.
It's just a word.
But McCullin translates that sterile geopolitical policy into an inescapable physical reality. Imagine sitting in your comfortable living room holding this photograph.
You're forced to look at a boy who no longer possesses the caloric energy to even register your presence.
It's devastating.
That physical fading is devastating on an individual level. But our sources push us to ask an even darker question here. What happens when that exact same numbness infects an entire society?
How does a community process a war that just never seems to end?
Which brings us to Derry, Northern Ireland in 1971, during the period known as the Troubles.
This image plays with the viewer's cognitive dissonance in such a profound way.
It really forces you to reconcile two completely incompatible realities existing in the exact same frame. At first glance, you think you're looking at a classic riot shot.
Right in the foreground, you have a Catholic youth aggressively lunging forward.
Attacking a fully geared up, retreating British soldier with a piece of wood or a rock. It looks like the violent peak of a street clash.
But then McCullin asks you to look past the action. He wants you to look at the background, at the residential street behind them.
And what do? You see ordinary women walking down the sidewalk, carrying their grocery shopping bags.
And they aren't ducking.
No, they aren't running for cover. They're just strolling by. A brutal clash between a civilian and an armed military occupation force is happening 20 feet away, and it is registering to them as, like, weather.
It's just a Tuesday.
Exactly. The lack of panic is the true horror of the photograph. It reminds me of sensory adaptation in neuroscience.
Oh, like when you stop smelling something.
Yeah. When you walk into a room with a terrible, overwhelming smell, your brain eventually filters it out so you can just continue to function.
Yeah.
In Derry, the citizens' brains have literally filtered out the trauma of war just so they can go buy a loaf of bread.
The violence has been completely normalized. It's just background noise.
It's chilling.
McCullin is showing us that war isn't always an explosive, singular event that shatters normal life. Sometimes war is a slow-acting poison that society just gradually learns to metabolize.
The tragedy isn't just the thrown rock. The tragedy is that a community has been forced to adapt to madness as if it were mundane.
And when violence becomes background noise, the next thing to go isn't just the fear, it's the fundamental sense of right and wrong.
Which leads us to the total moral collapse McCullin documented in Beirut, Lebanon in 1976.
The Lebanese Civil War fragmented a once cosmopolitan city into these brutalist, warring militia fiefdoms. And this specific photograph is deeply difficult to process because of the emotional whiplash it induces.
Tell me about it. The image shows a group of young, heavily armed militiamen, and they are joyful.
They're having a great time.
They are laughing, they're playing a lute-like instrument, they're celebrating and striking heroic poses for the camera, and they are doing all of this just steps away from the dead body of a young girl lying in the rubble of the street.
The framing of this shot is a masterclass in psychological storytelling.
So exactly how does the framing work here? Because my eye is immediately drawn to the laughing boys, and it honestly takes a second to even notice the tragedy on the ground.
That delayed realization is entirely deliberate. McCullin composes the photograph so that your eye naturally follows the energetic, joyful lines of the militiamen first.
So the camera bypasses the humanity of the dead girl.
Exactly. It mimics the exact moral bypass that the boys themselves are experiencing. By the time you notice her, you feel kind of complicit in their oversight.
It literally makes your stomach turn. You look at it and think, how is this humanly possible? How do you play music over a corpse?
Because the real casualty in this photograph isn't just the poor girl on the ground. The casualty is the human conscience.
The environment of war has completely eradicated their basic morality.
War has deformed them into something utterly unrecognizable. McCullin isn't documenting a military victory here. He's documenting the death of human empathy.
Processing all of this, the Marine's mind, the boy's fading body, the apathetic shoppers, the laughing militia, it brings up a massive, deeply uncomfortable ethical tension.
It really does.
It is a question we have to ask youth listener to sit with for a moment. Imagine you are McCullin. You're standing there looking through a viewfinder as a starving child or a dying civilian. Why just press the shutter?
This raises an important question. It's the eternal, agonizing dilemma of the conflict photographer.
The role of the witness versus the role of the rescuer.
Exactly.
You are building a legendary, award-winning career off the absolute worst, most degrading moments of other people's ruined lives. The photographer gets to pack up their gear, fly home to a quiet flat in London, and develop the film.
While the subjects stay in the rubble.
Right. Doesn't the photographer become a bit of an opportunistic vulture?
It's a harsh word, but McCullin did not shy away from that guilt. He carried it with him constantly. He actually once made a deeply damning, brutal admission about his profession.
What did you say?
He said, "Taking a photograph becomes easier than helping."
Wow. That is less of an interview quote and more of a confession.
It is. He is acutely aware of his own complicity.
Yeah.
He knows that by choosing to frame the shot, he is actively choosing not to put the camera down and intervene in that specific fraction of a second.
He bears the heavy burden of that choice.
He does. And this self-awareness, this crushing guilt, it dictates the aesthetic choices he makes. It's exactly why he refuses to make his photographs beautiful.
There's a real paradox there, though. Because photography is fundamentally an art form, right?
Right.
It relies on lighting, the golden ratio, the balance of composition. But if you take a photograph of a starving child and you make it perfectly composed with, say, cinematic golden hour lighting, haven't you essentially turned their tragedy into a digestible piece of art for a gallery wall?
You've sanitized their suffering for a comfortable audience.
Exactly.
If it's beautiful, you can digest it as high art. You can look at it and say, oh, what a masterful use of light, instead of, what a horrific nightmare.
And McCullin actively fights against that aestheticization.
Yes. He uses harsh, high contrast, gritty black and white chemistry because he knows that beauty creates a safe distance for the viewer. He makes the image ugly. He makes it confrontational.
And most importantly, as you look through his body of work, you notice a recurring mechanism. He deliberately waits, sometimes for hours, for the exact moment his subjects look directly into the lens.
Yeah, you see it everywhere in his work.
The shell-shocked soldier in Vietnam, the starving boy in Biafra, the people in the streets, they are all looking right down the barrel of the camera.
Which means they're looking directly at you.
Yes.
McCullin uses the subject's gaze to completely collapse the thousands of miles between a war zone and your safe living room. You cannot hide behind the artistic composition because the subject is staring you down.
They're pulling you into their reality and implicating you in their suffering.
It's unavoidable.
This entire journey brings us back to the contrast we mentioned at the very beginning of this deep dive. When we think of the founding fathers of war photography, we think of Robert Capa and his blurry kinetic shots of the Normandy beach landings.
Right.
Capa's famous motto was literally, if your photographs aren't good enough, you're not close enough. For Capa, it was all about physical proximity to the danger.
He captured the adrenaline, the momentum, the split second the bullet flies by. He shows you what it is like to be in the line of fire.
Capa puts you in the boots of the soldier charging the beach. You can still find traces of bravery, of heroism, and of clear moral purpose in his work.
But through McCullin's lens, that momentum has completely stopped.
If Capa shows you the adrenaline of the battle, McCullin asks you what it feels like to live with the devastating permanent consequences of it.
In McCullin's world, there are no heroes.
There are no clear winners. The soldier, the civilian, the photographer, and ultimately the viewer, everyone is simply broken by the machinery of conflict.
He is showing us the mechanics of human degradation. He proves that war does not just destroy infrastructure or shift national borders.
It systematically dismantles our humanity.
And perhaps most frighteningly, his work demonstrates that war grows silently, like a cancer, wherever it is ignored by the rest of the world.
It normalizes itself.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, war thrives in apathy.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive by asking you to picture a loud, explosive, dynamic war photo. But McCullin takes away the noise.
He strips away the explosions, the flags, and the heroism.
He leaves us with the absolute deafening silence of a broken human bone staring right through the camera, straight into our eyes. And he leaves us with a heavy burden. Because we can't say we don't know anymore. Now that we've seen this, what do we do with it?